my name is Stephanie and I'm the Learning Manager here at the Museum of Australian Democracy at Old Parliament House. We are a building which has lots of historic spaces, but also we get the opportunity to talk to you about your voice in our democracy. Now, here we are in the Prime Minister's suite. This has been set up to look exactly like it was when Parliament was here in the 1980s. Now, I want to take you on a walk through of these spaces, but before we go, you're going to hear lots of typewriters, lots of different sounds as we move through some of the offices where the staff that supported the Prime Minister would have worked. So let's go take a peek. Check this out. You can see typewriters on the desks. You've got things like Walkmans. I wonder if you've ever seen a Walkman before. And some very familiar items of stationery as well, your stapler and your sticky tape. But take a good look around. I wonder what you're noticing. Look at the television. Does it look like your television at home? Now this is where a lot of secretaries would have worked that helped to put together all the notes, the daily runnings to help the Prime Minister to be able to do their job. But let's head down the corridor and see some of the other people that worked in this important space. These were some very important people. So in here, we would have had the speechwriters who worked on very important speeches that the Prime Minister would have been able to read to Australians for special events and other guests that would come and visit our country. Now I have another office just down this way. You'll be able to see where some of the advisors would have worked. They need to be close by to the Prime Minister because you never know what information they might need at any time to help with the decision-making process. You might notice that there's lots of paper in these offices. And just a little way down the corridor, someone who is very important to the functioning of the Prime Minister is the Principal Private Secretary. And a key feature of this office is this little peephole right here. I wonder why you'd have a peephole looking into the Prime Minister's office. Well, it's important for our Principal Private Secretary to be able to support the Prime Minister, to know what's going on and perhaps know when they needed to be rescued from a meeting. But keep coming this way and we'll see where the Prime Minister used to work. So here we are in the Prime Minister's office. I wonder what you noticed as we walked in. This room is set up for Bob Hawke, who was our last Prime Minister to serve in this particular building when it was a working Parliament. Did you notice his desk front and centre in the middle there and his chair? You also will be able to see the seats for very important visitors. Behind us are bookshelves filled with Hansard records. That's a record of what's been said in Parliament that's bound into a book. I wonder if you also notice the phone on the desk. Now, it won't look like a phone that you carry around today, but it's got lots of buttons on it so that the Prime Minister could quickly access his ministers, his advisors, and his private secretary. Now, I have a great story to tell you. Ben Chifley was our Prime Minister from 1945 until 1949, and when he had his term in office, his private phone was one digit different from the local butcher just down the road from Parliament House. And so occasionally he would get calls from people asking to place their order. Now, the Prime Minister was very kind. He took their order and then he would ring up the butcher to let them know what the person had asked for. Such a different time. Imagine having to take on that extra role. Why would the Prime Minister have answered that call? Because they wouldn't want to give away their number to the public, otherwise they'd have to keep changing their phone number because people would then be ringing to discuss all sorts of things other than their butcher order that they would like to put in. So behind me you can also see a flag in the background, the Australian flag. Now keep in mind that this was 1988 that this room is set up to represent. At Australian Parliament House, you'll find that not only do they have the Australian flag, but often at press conferences and in the chambers you'll find the Aboriginal flag as well. Now, this is a space where lots of meetings would have occurred, but also press conferences where the Prime Minister would have been getting ready to deliver a message to the Australian people.
Good evening to you all. As a nation, we now have to do some tough and challenging things together.
Or doing interviews with reporters who are also working in the building. I wonder if you had an opportunity to sit in these seats, what important issue would you want to discuss with the Prime Minister? So this is the view outside the window in the Prime Minister's office. Imagine having an office right at the front of a building with a view like this. I wonder what you would have seen outside the window. This is a place where people would peacefully protest. That's one way we can have our voice heard in our democracy. And out here, you can actually see one of Australia's longest ongoing protests, the Aboriginal Tent Embassy, directly across the road there. Let's keep going and see what else we can find in the Prime Minister's suite. Follow me. Now, very important, we've got the dressing room for the Prime Minister, and we've also got the bathroom. Very humble, 1970s vibe, I think you'll feel. Now we're going to head all the way down this corridor and into the cabinet room. Follow me. Take a look at this. The cabinet room is such an important space, and you might notice how thick the door is. I wonder why that would be. Let's take a look inside. So here we are in the cabinet room. I wonder what you're noticing. I wonder if you've noticed the shape of the table and what that might symbolise. The cabinet is a group of ministers who would gather to discuss really important issues on behalf of the government. Some of the ministers in this room, you may have heard of their portfolios before, so like the Minister of Education, the Minister of Defence. You may even have your own ministers within your student leadership group. But when they come into this room, it's about really rich discussion. It's about looking at issues that affect all Australians and considering lots of different perspectives. And what we want is those rich conversations, those rich discussions which allow these ministers to come to the best conclusion that will support the Australian people. It's a tough job working in this space, but we want to leave this room all on the same page. So when they're working in here, you need a safe space. You need somewhere where we can share ideas, share opinions, and so that's why we have the thick doors and the thick walls around us, which allow that little bit of extra security. Some of the issues that would have been debated in here were things like our national security. So when we were a working parliament, it was during the Second World War, but also the Vietnam War. This would have been the space where the ministers would have discussed things like whether we're sending troops overseas, where we're sending them, and what our decisions are around the security of our people. They're really important conversations that a senior group of people that are looking after our country need to have, and this is the space they would have done that. So how do you become the Prime Minister and get to work in a space like this? Well, here in Australia, we don't elect our Prime Minister, they're chosen by the party. And that party needs to have formed government. The Prime Minister works in the House of Representatives, and they are selected by members of their party to take on a leadership role. They also get to choose their ministers, and they become the spokesperson for Australia. So you'll often see them on the TV talking about different issues, going overseas to meet with different governments and representing Australia. Now, what kind of qualities would you want in a leader that's taking on a role like this? It's making me think about things like good public speaking skills, being confident, being able to make good decisions, and I guess work well with others. I wonder if you're starting to think about some other qualities that you think are important in someone who's representing you and all of the Australian people. If you had the opportunity to sit in these chairs that I mentioned earlier and talk to the Prime Minister, what are some important issues that you'd want to discuss? And how would you prepare for that meeting? Feels like something you need to do a little bit of research around and gather different perspectives, perhaps chat to other people and get their ideas before you come into a very important meeting like this. Now, you don't need to be the Prime Minister to create change here in Australia. There are lots of other ways in our democracy to make sure that your voice is heard, from peaceful protests to signing petitions. You can also write a letter to your local member or send them an email. You can help out in your community, volunteering, or perhaps think about some of the everyday changes you can make, like planting more flowers in your backyard to support the bees. All of these positive changes are ways that we can help create a better world for all. I want you to think about some of the issues in your local community and ways that you can create positive change. So perhaps you can start by writing a list of things that you notice around your local area, and then have a go at picking one and seeing what change you can create. Did you hear that? I think I better answer the phone. How do you think I get this Perspex thing off the phone? Hello? Yes, a dozen sausages, some rissoles and some pork chops. I'm on it.